Welcome, everyone. This is your brother, asarimhotep, with the Madu Mandela Institute for the Advancement of Science and Culture. Today is Tuesday, June the 30th of 2020, and we are still in a pandemic. So I appreciate y'all for taking the time to come to this channel in this time of quarantine and listening to my very special guest over the past few weeks. And I hope that you are taking the time to jot down some of the stuff that they're saying and research the materials and adding them to your bag of wisdom. And today we are keeping within that tradition as we have a very, very special guest with us tonight. And I see that many of y'all, are liking the music. Keep in mind that all the music that you hear thus far is produced by me, because that's what I do in my spare time is, produce music just cause. But anyway, that's a mix that I made. And so y'all will hear some more as time goes on. But as you all know, we are in the season of the Hapi film, and we started a series of interviews with individuals who are in the film or who had anything to do with the production of the film. And we have another one of those individuals with us today, Brother Jabari Osaze, with the Shrine of Maat out of New York City. So, but as always, I'd like to thank those who made themselves known in the chat. And I would like to say peace to Sister Tamika, peace to Marquise Kidd, Carl Robinson, Brother Chavez, Pure Black, Danny Wilson, what is this? D Centavo, OG Gorilla, and Matthew Simmons, Style M. Heru, Osakwe, and Al Kebulon Mine. Thank you. And who is this? Juan Love. Peace, Brother Juan Love, for joining us this evening. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our good brother, my frat brother, Jabari Osaze, to the platform. How you doing, good brother?
Peace, brother. How are you?
I am well. And yourself?
I'm incredible. And I'm always, I was saying this to you on our conversation on Facebook. I'm always excited to talk to you. A brother whose mind and intellect I enjoy. And so I'm honored to speak to you and to speak to the family. I really hope that we'll be able to add some information that will help enliven them during this difficult time, right? People are locked down. So many people in our community have made their transition. This is a really good time to retool, to think about what we're going to be able to do going forward. And so I'm also really honored that you choose to speak to the entire community during this time, because we need some intellectual and stimulating diversion.
Indeed. And so it's an honor to have you here. And there's a million reasons why you could be here in terms of what you do and what you're involved in. But the primary concentration today is on the Hapi film.
Yes.
Now before we get into that, normally I would read a resume or whatnot, but there are people who are on my channel who may not necessarily be familiar with you.
Right.
So kind of tell us, who you are, where you from, and you can kind of lean into, what inspired you ultimately to get into what you do in these current times. So what's that trajectory? How's that trajectory been?
That's good. I should say to you folks that I'm a native New York City guy, born in Brooklyn, raised in Queens, and returned, as I look at it, to Harlem, the home of my father. He used to call it the old neighborhood. And so I had a real connection to Harlem because of my father's deep love for this community. So I returned here. Growing up as a kid in New York City, you know, I had the ability to, as you can probably imagine, those of you who know me, to kind of be an intellectual, nerdy kid, while also experiencing friends and family who were doing some things very different. And so I think that many of us, probably like yourself, Brother Sar, we had a choice to decide what our lives were going to look like. And there are some people who made choices similar to me that didn't make it to be able to do the kinds of things that I do. And I think about them and think about how I was not always the most intelligent, not always the most prepared, not always the most studied. And some of those brothers and sisters are not with us. And so in some ways, part of my journey has been remembering the fact that I am here to work and to make those of my peers and those people who were older who put information into me proud. Those people who are now ancestors proud. And so that's part of how I became who I am. I had the wonderful opportunity to go to Cornell University and to study at the Africana Studies and Research Center. It was a major aspect of who I am. It set part of the direction of my life. There I studied with some of the greats that you all know, folks like Dr. Yosef Ben Yakinen, Dr. John Henry Clark, and also some elders and ancestors who were a little bit not as well known in what we usually call the conscious community, but very well known in the scholarly community. Folks like Dr. Don Ohadike, who is an ancestor now, and perhaps the scholar that most influenced my thinking, my scholarship, Dr. James Turner, who is near and dear to me. He was the person that put the energy into me and really helped me become the person that I was. At Cornell, I truly became even more engrossed than I was in high school with studying ancient Africa and trying to understand the situation we were in. In high school, I actually, and here's something I don't always think about, Brother Asar. So much of the challenges that Black people, that people of African descent struggle with today are the challenge, the difficulty around resources in our communities. And my schooling has meant that a kid who was really academically inclined had to move further and further and further away from his community to get an education. That's really what my story is in many ways. And by the time I got to high school, I was traveling over 2 hours a day, over 2 hours each way to high school. And I remember going to that school. It was a Tamwa white school, and they were violently racist. So my experience there was a really difficult one. I think that in many ways, while that experience was so hard, so difficult, it further shaped who I am. It forced me to try to understand what happened before so I could understand how I got to this place where I could have adults on a street corner in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, see me and spit on the floor for no reason whatsoever, or have people in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, chase me to the train for no reason. Here I'm a child. I'm a young Black child being chased in some instances by adults. And so that even forced me to travel further and to struggle more to obtain consciousness and to obtain and really develop some ability to understand the history of where we were. And then going to Cornell University, that really rounded that experience out. And I'll say to you that it was at Cornell also that I began to realize that I didn't have to just look at ancient Africa, specifically ancient Kemet, as a historical entity, but that I realized that there were people who were practicing Kemetic spirituality. And so that led me to go and study at the Saraset Society in Brooklyn at one point, and then finally to get to what would become my spiritual home, the Shrine of Ptah, with Baba Heru Ankh Ra Samad Sepatal. Most people just call Baba Heru. And so Baba Heru, John Henry Clark, Yosef Ben Yakinen, James Turner, those are some of the folks who really helped Jabari become the individual that I am today, that helped me really to direct my life, to understand what I was, as I usually say, divinely ordained to do. What was I here on this planet to do? It was those elders and ancestors who helped me do that.
Indeed, indeed. And before we move on, I see Brother Kofi in the chat, and just want to say and acknowledge the book that him and his research team, the Kofi Pasai research team, have published. So I have my copy. Is Spears of the Mossi, A Historical Survey of the Minds of African Warrior Scholars, Volume 1. So I will be tapping into this soon, and hopefully we can get these brothers on the program to discuss the work, its motivations, and expected outcomes. So if y'all haven't gotten y'all copy,
go get it.
I got mine here in the flesh. So with that said, you continued on, and you recently got a master's, or you may have had the master's in, was it theology?
Yeah, I have a master's of divinity. I actually just received that. I guess that's early this year. I already had a master's degree in human service administration, because much of my life has been managing nonprofit entities, particularly for children in our neighborhoods. Brother Sar, that's the kind of hat that when folks Google Jabari Osaze and go back, it's almost like they're digging in the crates, right? They go back and they look 20, 25 years ago. You see me working with young people, because that was in many ways the charge that I was given by those ancestors and elders that I mentioned earlier. They said that my goal should always be to work in our community, to live in our community, rather than to be up on the hill. Some of them were on the hill, right? They're like, no, please don't do what I'm doing. Be in the community, be in the hood. And so that is a large part of what I've done as well. So I have a master's degree in human service administration that has certainly served me well. And I recently got my master's degree in divinity en route to the doctorate, which I hopefully will complete and defend sometime this summer.
So we'll be calling you Dr. Osaze in the near future. So I
hopefully sometime in the fall we'll be. Yeah. I'm dissertation only at this point, so I'm working on dissertation.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Well, there's another part of this equation that I want to recognize at the moment, and so there is a sister, Nica Osaze. I want to give you a shout out, and can you tell us about who she is in relation to you? How she fits into this life.
We've been together so long, Brother Asar, that me telling my story in some ways is telling her story, right? So she was, someone I met at Cornell. She was there as a scholar at Cornell. I think that our interests melded well. She was the linguistics major. In fact, I think at the time she was one of 2 Black linguistics majors at Cornell, which was really, really unusual. And it was a large department, right? It's merged with another department now, but it was a large department. And there were only 2 Black people in that whole department. She was one of them. It was one of those departments that there were individuals that would go into, and they just, some of the faculty were openly hostile to people of African descent. I remember her taking her hieroglyphics class at Cornell, right? And the professor did not want her there. I mean, she's sitting in the class and the professor walks in to write on the board. You could imagine the scene, right? And he turns around and sees a few Black faces, and he announces that the only way you could be in this class is if you were a linguistics major, you had taken Hebrew, or gotten special permission. He did that to get rid of the Black people. So when all of them had to slink out of the class, by the way, this class had no prerequisites. He was doing this on his own, right? when they had to slink out and she stayed there, he said, tell us your story, basically. In other words, you black person, you Negro didn't get up and leave, so you better have a good reason to be here. That's the kind of experience she went through to obtain the information that she did. And you know, as she was a warrior scholar, like I was a warrior scholar, while she was looking at the history of ancient Africa from a slightly different perspective than my own, our lives became intertwined there. And, you know, that was 1994. So you can imagine that we've been married now for almost 19 years next week. And
Congrats.
her journey has been my journey has been her journey. She has really, really supported me in all the things that I've done in a way that I think most brothers, you know, would be envious. She really is the person that allows me to do so much of what I do and be so much of who I am.
Indeed.
Yeah. And of course, she's the one that got the doctorate before I did, right? She's Dr. And so she does important and great work as well. I've also noticed a few other people in the room. I got a chance to glance. I'm seeing folks that are part of the Shrine of Maat, like Sanette Lisa Attaway, and I'm seeing the good brother Shazmu Pataman and other folks. I mean, the One Love folks that I recognize from all over social media. I just want to say peace to you all. I am so glad that you're here. You know that there are other things that you could be doing at 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, right? Stuff that the majority of our people are doing, Asar, right? You know,
Yeah.
and these folks are the folks that are saying, no. I need to understand what it means to be an African so I can help my people, our people, move forward. That's powerful, and you should be saluted for doing this kind of stuff as well.
Indeed. And I want to give a shout out to someone else who is also in the chat, and that is our good brother Garfield. And today is his birthday.
Today's his birthday.
Yeah, today is his birthday. So happy birthday, brother Garfield.
Peace, brother. Peace.
And are y'all still doing the debate conversation? Is that going to happen?
Heck knows, man. You know, brother Asar, the pandemic wiped some of that out. And you know what? Part of it was a good reason, because Garfield and I have been allies and friends for a long time. Some of that in there got a little sour, and that stuff has been squashed, right? I think that we should have a good scholarly conversation. I want to say peace, happy solar return to my brother. We still can have a really good, interesting conversation on this topic. And so I'm hoping that when the pandemic recedes a little bit, we'll be able to do that.
Indeed. So again, peace to everyone who is in the chats, both on Facebook and on YouTube. And hold on one sec. There we go. And for those who are just joining us, we have with us soon to be Dr. Jabari Osaze, putting it in the universe already. And he is one of the cast members of this film called Hapi, which is a documentary film created by our good brother Taki, who we had on along with Sister Felicia and Brother Seed, producers and editors of the film. They were on Saturday night, so y'all can go to the channel and check the archive if you didn't catch it live. And there's a film that, you know, I was able to be a part of. Had a small thing in it, but I'm in there, so my face is in there, so I'm like, yay. But so first and foremost, tell us what this film is about, and then tell us what was your contribution. What did you want people to know and understand, you know, to be added, you know, and to make sure that they had to have this information in the film?
Right.
You know, what was it that you contributed to the film?
Yeah. Let me say that the concept of Hapi is exciting. Just hearing that, instead of getting the kinds of documentaries on ancient Africa that all of us are clamoring to do, and we need more done from our perspective. That in and of itself was exciting. Just hearing that someone from our community was going to come forward really with this third documentary focusing on ancient Africa was powerful, right? And for those of you who don't know, he did Nubia, and he also did the Tekken. These are all the documentaries you have to see, right? So definitely that was exciting. But then to hear that he was going to do something even more difficult in some ways and even more unusual was exciting to me. So Hapi's subtitle is Economics, the Role of Economics in the Development of Civilization. And that's exciting, Brother Asar, because we often talk about golden burials and golden tombs and amazing monuments. And I think that you could easily talk about the story of ancient Kemet that way, but it leaves something out that we certainly need in 2020 and beyond. We have to begin to think about how Africans were able to master the environment, understand the ecology, understand their role within the universe, and then create a powerful, perhaps one of the most important societies that has ever existed. When we think of it that way, and we're not obsessed with ridiculous comments like things like the aliens created the pyramids, and some strange Aryan race came forward and did it. These are all things that we've heard that people have argued. When we stop thinking that way, we actually have to begin to think that Africans built that society, and we have to ask ourselves how. What were the factors that led them to actually create this amazing nation in the desert, by the way? I mean, that part of that is part of it's some of the thinking that we have to come to. Later in Kemet's history, we see nations that are now burgeoning in power around it, fighting for Kemet because some historians say it was the breadbasket. Kemet was able to produce more agriculture in the desert than nations were able to produce when they were in the lush Mediterranean type environment. We have to ask ourselves, how? What are the things that Africans did to organize themselves, to structure themselves towards the development of this nation? And if we think that the story of economics and finance is separate from the story of African greatness, then we've been told the wrong story. And so I was excited to hear that Brother Taki, a brother I've known for a long time, was going to meld these topics together. I'm going to tell you, it's almost like when you're seeing a gymnast and you hear that they're going to do some sort of maneuver that has a really high, is a really high score because it's difficult to do. I knew that this was going to be hard, and he nails it. He nails it. It is really a powerful documentary, and I know that asarimhotep and I are not just saying that because we're in it. It's the kind of documentary that our community needs, because it'll have us not just understand our ancient history, but also understand what has happened in between and how we can move forward to do amazing things once more. So this is the kind of documentary that we need.
Indeed, and especially, because this is the first time in my 40 plus years of living that there's even a question of why we should study Egypt. Like there's a segment of our community who's even questioning the very audacity to have in our bag of wisdom knowledge of ancient Kemet.
That's right.
And when you view films like this, or when you just study directly the text and things, you see exactly why.
That's right.
And one of the things I wish, because my contribution to the film was mainly linguistic, so they just wanted to know some linguistic connections between ancient Egypt, West Africa, and things of that nature.
Yes.
But if I would have entered the conversation on the economics piece, one of the first things that I would have mentioned was that one of the characteristics that about West Africa is cowrie shells.
Mm-hmm.
What people don't understand is cowrie shells are not indigenous to West Africa.
Mm.
They come from East Africa and on the edge where the Nile Valley, where, you know, Ethiopia, Eritrea, you
Mm-hmm.
know, Egypt is concerned. That was the main currency from ancient Egypt. And the reason why you got all those cowrie shells over there is because of ancient Egypt and the economy
Mm-hmm.
that was that they controlled at this time. And
That's
so
right.
it's not a coincidence that you see at the fall of Egypt, now you're starting to see the original Ghana, Songhai, you know, and these other kingdoms arise because now there's a vacuum
Mm.
which they're, you know, are building. And so without the study of ancient Egypt, you don't get a true holistic history of Africa in general.
That's
And I
right.
think this is, you know, this kind of film, you know, helps to uh, start that conversation in a very meaningful way,
Mm-hmm.
you know. Uh, so, you know, what was your just take of the film itself? What
Mm.
is your opinion
Mm.
of the film?
I honestly believe that Brother Taki and Brother Seed and the other folks who worked in the development of this film, they had a really high bar. They got together some of the most noted thinkers on the topics that they were looking at, and they were actually able to get them into the film. You know, to actually have a Dr. Jeffries, a Professor Small, a Dr. Solange Ashby, to have Wade Nobles, you know, to have Asarimhotep, who is a scholar that our community is well aware of. And eventually they'll be speaking Asarimhotep's name decades from now. Like, look at this, the body of work that he's put forward. His body of work is it for folks our age, he and I are around the same age, is unparalleled, right? And so to have folks that are thinkers that have actually considered these topics come together to actually focus on how this ancient story translates to us today is powerful. It's powerful. You know, he feels it in several countries. He's able to actually get folks to actually talk about the challenge of coming out of enslavement. What is it? What is white supremacy, and how does it work in this system? How do we understand the economic position that people of African descendants of African ancestry? How do we look at white supremacy and how it has affected where we are today? How do we now attempt to try to find new ways to be able to build ourselves as a community, ourselves as a nation, in order to be self-sufficient once more? There's so much in this film that, honestly, family, not only are you going to love it, I had the opportunity to see a screening of it at Medgar Evers right before the pandemic. In fact, I think that might have been the last time I was in a room full of a few hundred people. It's right before things hit off, right? Before we said, you know, you can't do that anymore. There was an amazing screening, and I was absolutely enthralled with the kinds of things that I saw. And I'm going to say that the community is going to be engaged. They're going to be inspired. And it's going to pose a lot of questions. I know that there are going to be some people that come away saying, why didn't they talk about this? Or I don't know why they didn't pose these issues. And I think that in speaking to Taki, that was part of what he was trying to do. This documentary is primed for community discussions. Mm-hmm. He doesn't say this is exactly what we have to do. Because if you've studied these issues long enough, you know that there's going to be a comprehensive solution to what we have to do. There's no one thing that's going to work. Brother Asar, sometimes when I'm on other channels like Sonetter's channel and others, I end up debating with people about whether we should actually engage in voting, which is a bizarre concept to me, right? That we would just take one of the strategies off of the table. And I always have to say to people, if you're thinking that I am saying that we vote and now, you know, there's this great black sunrise, and the Messiah will walk down the hill. That's not what this is, right? There are going to be a number of strategies that we will have to utilize, because there were a wide number of strategies that were utilized to subjugate African people. There is no silver bullet. We have to create a plan and work a plan. And so this documentary says, this is who we are. This is what we've done. Here are the challenges we faced. Perhaps these are some of the things that we need to consider. And then hopefully what will happen is there'll be great conversations in communities in Harlem and the Harlems around the United States and around the world, in fact, talking about how we should either go in the direction of the suggestions, or we should tweak the suggestions, or we should add some other things to the conversation. That is what this documentary does in a little over 2 hours. You're going to be excited to see it. I really do believe, family, you're going to enjoy it.
And for those who don't know, the film is going to be streaming online. I know since I'm back here in Texas until August, we was trying to set up before the pandemic, some screenings out here in like Austin or Houston and Dallas. But, the pandemic kind of put that to a halt. So, not knowing when this is going to end, they decided to stream it online. And so you can purchase tickets for your household at the Hapi, at the link that you see at the bottom that's scrolling, or at least, I don't know if it links, but that web address that you see scrolling, hapifilm.com. You can purchase your ticket, there. It's going to premiere on July the 18th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you have not gotten your ticket already, I encourage you to visit that link and get it. And so again, it premieres. It's going to be streamed online July the 18th at 7 p.m. And then I'm pretty sure just after that, you can watch it anytime since it's streaming. But
I think there's going to be some digital copies that you can purchase as well, is what I think I heard say. So you'll be able to actually find ways to watch this again. You're going to need to watch it more than once. The folks that are in the documentary, like myself, were taking notes. So you're going to need to watch it more than once. You're going to want to watch it more than once. You're going to want to take the notes and do your research and then say, well, how do I bring this to empower my family? Because one of the things, I'm going to just say this really quickly about the story of Kemet. We often think that, once again, the story of Kemet is about golden burials and amazing monuments. But remember, they do this in the desert. How do they decide that they're going to use what could be considered as a calamity as an opportunity? How do they look at their situation and say, no, this is actually not something that we should run away from, but it's something we should embrace and utilize it for our betterment? And in doing that so effectively, they create a society that lasts in its prime stages for over 3 millennia. And so that's a powerful thing. If we just look at what they did and say, well, where is, and by the way, I should say that Hapi is the original name for that river that we today call the Nile erroneously, right? We need to ask ourselves, where is the Hapi in our lives? Where's the Hapi where we live? So that we are able to, I'm not talking specifically about a river, I'm talking about seeing the opportunity in the challenges that face us. Rather than sitting around and talking about the things we don't have, how can we utilize these challenges as opportunities? And I think that this documentary will help us have that kind of conversation.
I know in the film that, part of what I was talking about in that moment, it was, they edited out, but it's an important piece just upon what you were saying. Again, I'm dealing with linguistic connections and ideas. And so what we discover when it comes to African languages in a lot of these proto stages of the languages is that the word for foot also ends up being the word for water in river. Now, you got to put yourself in the archaic African mind, where is the primary focus is survival. So what kind of water is safe for you to drink? The kind that moves. So whether you're talking about rainwater or you're talking about rapid, river water that has a chance to be filtered, or in terms of streams over rocks and things that is, it's not necessarily clean a priori, but it is cleaner than if you was just to have just a sitting lake.
That's right.
Or whatnot. And so the same word for foot, becomes a word, a verb for walk or run, becomes a word for water in general. So even in modern times, when you turn the faucet on, and you walk away, your mom was like, "Who left the water
running?"
You know what I'm saying? So you still have that archaic association in your mind,
right?
But what's also interesting is that the same word for walk or foot, walk, run also ends up being the same word for business, even in the ancient Egyptian language. And so it tells you a little something about, in two different trajectories, because with the Hapi River, it allows for you to travel to different markets per se, up and down. And like, because you've been to Egypt, that if you ever ridden on any of the boats, you have brothers and sisters in canoes trying to sell you something.
That's right.
On the boats and whatnot, and they speak multiple languages. So like when their last, they were, they hear from France, they start speaking French.
That's
they
right.
Hear German, they start speaking German. They hear some Arabic, Hebrew, they start all just in this. This is how they communicate. And so the river is a road for commerce, but it also tells you about what it takes to go out and to do business. And matter of fact, like you being from New York, you would know this term when they would say, like when Method Man says, walk these dogs and represent who. What do we mean by walk these dogs? I'm about to go out and handle my business.
That's right.
So it is telling you about what it takes. You have to go out. You have to expand and travel, to make things happen. And well, with the internet, it allows you to to travel a bit without necessarily physically going to certain spaces. But to a large extent, you still got to go out, with the people and conduct business and walk. So it's just interesting how this word for foot, becomes the word for the very, river itself, which was the catalyst for business and travel up and down to these different markets. And then just in general, in another direction, it becomes a word for business. And so in this mind about working, about traveling, about networking, and I'm bringing this up because ultimately what is saying is that the nature of business is built on the strength of relationships. And I think that is something that has to be put into the equation, and why all of that spiritual stuff that you were talking about becomes very important, because these are the things that tie people together to see themselves in very important ways that they can then, of course, at a minimum, trust each other to do business.
That's right.
To walk the same path with each other, And so with that being said, we mentioned earlier, like the shrine of Maat. What is that? How did that come to be? And the network that shrine itself is a part of, and the benefits of members, and not necessarily just to promote that, but as a model,
yes,
for what needs to be done on a larger scale, with these kinds of things. So
Right. Yeah. That's a really good question. Because in many ways, as you talked about how the river has been transferred even into an online parlance, how now all of a sudden it has been the running is running of cable or running of a frequency, or allowing us to communicate and to interact in that way. The Shrine of Maat has done some interest, has had to see itself differently because of that, and say, what is the opportunity in what we're doing? And I'll just say to you that the Shrine of Maat, which is a spiritual institution based on the spiritual form of ancient Egypt, ancient Kemet, has actually, in many ways, it is an iteration of the Shrine of Ptah, which was created by one of my elders, the person that has been, in many ways, most important in my development, Baba Heru Ankh-Ra Samadse Ptah. So I studied with him after being at the Saroset Society, and my spiritual home was at the Shrine of Ptah. And to make a long story short, there was one time that my wife and I went to him, and we wanted him to do something with the Shrine of Ptah. And he looked at us and he said, we were really being a little arrogant. We were like, Baba, this is what we're going to do. We spoke to other people who are members, and you're going to do this. Telling the elder what to do, right? And he did some kind of mental, spiritual, Aikido kind of, he just went with the flow, right? Instead of actually saying, Negro, who are you? Or young man, how do you think you should speak to me that way? He simply said, I think that all of what you said is amazing, but it's your time now. He said, it's time for you you said that we've been studying to be a priest with me for many years. It's time. And so Nica and I had both been working on priesthood. We always intended to be priests in the Shrine of Ptah. But he said, no, it's your turn to do the Shrine of Maat. And so in many ways, that charge came from Baba Heru. And I always say that the Shrine of Maat is a fruit on the tree that comes from the root of the Shrine of Ptah. So just understand that when I talk about the Shrine of Maat, I'm talking about a spiritual institution that is based on ancient African spirituality. And its members, because we're in 2020, the members of the Shrine of Maat are as far away as Canada, as far away as Brazil, certainly we have members in Harlem. And we had initially thought that we were going to be a Harlem shrine. We're a Harlem-based shrine, but we have most of our members are not even in Harlem. And so I honestly believe that we decided that we were going to use part of the challenge that we were facing as an opportunity. Our space is really small, Asar.
I see kind of in your living room.
That's you got right there. That's about our. So basically, Nica and I have a brownstone in Harlem, right? And it's narrow. So the bottom level is the shrine. It's actually, that is the shrine. It's not, we don't use it for really anything other than shrine work. That's the shrine. But having a space that is that small means that we had to think a little bit more deeply about what it meant to be members, right? And I remember, Brother Asar, we got an email from someone who was saying that they wanted us to do everything online. And we said, we don't want to do that. And we realized that the email was written in what most people would call broken English. Who is writing like this? And after we said we don't do that, he sent us another email back saying, that's a shame because I am one of you and there is no one like me where I am. He was in Denmark. There is no one like me where I am.
Exactly.
And we have all, I know that you have felt this, Asar. We have all been in the situation where, because of our study, because of our commitment to understanding the ancient story of our African ancestors, sometimes that can be a really lonely thing, right? When everyone else is doing what they do and you see the world differently, that can be really lonely. That's what this brother, who was a person of African descent in Denmark, was saying to us. And when he said that, we said, who are we to decide that this should just be in Harlem? How dare we Take the knowledge of our ancestors that we are trying to cultivate and be faithful to for all this time and say, look, if you ain't in Harlem, too bad. That's ridiculous. New York already has an embarrassment of riches in some way because so many of these great scholars either lived in New York or had a base in New York. So, to some degree, we're spoiled. So we have done much of what we do online. We have initiates that are coming through that are completing online. We have become more of an online institution. Not just because people look at videos, but because they literally interact with us on a daily, on a weekly, on a monthly basis. And we know them, even though they're not in our physical space. When the pandemic hit, we were already prepared for it. How do you see your challenges as opportunities? That's what I'm talking about. To take this back to the movie, just understand that these ancient Africans who lived along the Hapi, lived in the desert, lived along a river that flooded its banks so violently every year that it would destroy all the boundaries. When you look at the spiritual texts, they're all metaphor. There are many metaphors about the appropriateness of restoring the boundaries, right? And they're not always talking specifically. Sometimes they're talking metaphorically about restoring boundaries and not taking advantage of other people because the boundaries are gone, right? And so in many ways, people living there could have seen this existence as a nightmare. We're in the desert. We find this beautiful river that we can grow things by, Brother Asar. And then when it overthrows its banks, what can we do in this flood? It destroyed my house. The person that was farming just a little way away, when the waters receded, now they farming in my area. It's like, this could be a calamity. Just think about Hurricane Katrina. Think about Harvey. Think about all of those things that violently affected our communities. Think about Sandy here in this region, in the region I'm in the east coast of the United States. Imagine if we had seen those challenges as opportunities. Imagine if we had figured out how to build nations, build wealth around those things that were challenges. That's what the Hapi is about. Because we know each of us, everybody in the chat right now, everybody who watches this can tell you 50 things that plague our community, Asar. 50, easy, right off the top of the head, they're going to do this.
Exactly.
But how do we make the challenges opportunities? How do we move forward now that we are in this situation? And so that's what the Shrine of Maat is about. And hopefully that sort of thinking is also what the Hapi will still instill in a lot of other people as well.
Again, we have this segment of individuals in the New Age conscious community who believe that, ancient Kemet is dead, that we should only focus on West Africa and West African spirituality. But I noticed something when you introduced yourself at the beginning of the program, and we mentioned the Shrine of Maat. You didn't say ancient Kemetic, tradition. You just said African.
Yes.
And so, although we know Maat to be an ancient Egyptian word, what else do you incorporate? How does Africa as a whole fit into the strategies of the Shrine of Maat, in terms of teaching and elevating, saying its members?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. It gets to the crux of some of the challenges that we have in describing who we are and what we do. And some of the challenges that we have as a community trying to understand what direction we should go in. So yeah, we have this argument a lot now, Brother Asar, and I never saw it happening. I was stunned that there's some people that would like for us to disown Northeast Africa in its ancient phases. Like, we have a problem with West Africa. By the way, the people who make that argument, Asar, are often people who travel in West Africa less than you or I do. Which is bizarre, right? I'm an African. My spiritual form tends to come primarily from ancient Kemet, but that doesn't mean I see myself as distinct from those people of African descent. I'm an African, right? And I, even today, I'm looking to build relationships and commerce with people on the west coast of Africa. Now, this is not dissimilar than what we see in the rest of the history of Africa. Now, I'm going to say to you, you know that I'm working on my doctorate of divinity, and it's not in an African-centered institution. And I usually, when those folks from other communities say African spirituality, I'm going to say to you that I beat them up mercilessly. But the reality is there are so many similarities in African spirituality, in its worldview, in its way that it looks at the divine, in the way that it envisions the role of humans in the rest of the universe. There's so many similarities. The major differences are how they describe the spiritual form based on, as Professor Small says, their local ecology. That's the difference. That's the difference. Why is it that the rooster in some West African traditions is a primary analogy for spiritual thinking, and the baboon is in Northeast Africa? Well, they're still talking about the sun. Both of those animals have a connection to the sun. And so what they've done is they look at the animals in their environment and the way they behave, and they've described in analogy the understanding of how the universe works and the divine nature of the universe. That is what the differences are, primarily. And I should also say to you that Kemet is not the first society in Africa. Africans were doing things in large organizational manners, building relationships and commerce before Kemet. And Kemet benefits from that. And those nations that come after benefit from Kemet. So here's one example of that how this knowledge travels through Kemet and into the rest of the world. I mentioned the baboon, right? The baboon in Kemet is often seen to be a symbol of Jehuti, which in some ways is an analogy for wisdom, for measurement. He's connected directly to the phases of the moon. In fact, one of the headdresses you see him wearing is the phases of the moon, right? When we look at some of the oldest mathematical artifacts found in Africa, by the way, they're the oldest artifacts found anywhere in the world. We have to look at two artifacts at this point. We're talking about the Ishango bone and a Lumobo bone. Both of
the Great Lakes region.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So we're talking about artifacts that come primarily from southern and western Africa. That's what we're talking about. Much further south from Kemet. We're talking about maybe as far as 3,000 miles away. Very long distance.
Yeah.
And these artifacts show a very, very advanced counting system, because there are actually notches in each of them. They are incised on a baboon's femur. So now you see the connection between mathematics and the baboon. And it is believed that they may even have been counting the phases of the moon. You see the connection to the moon. So you might say, okay, well, the Kemetic people were using a device, and because they have this idea of Jehuti, this ibis bird that is connected to the baboon, that connects to mathematics and the phases of the moon, they were just doing, this is just their artifact. No. The Lumobo bone is now believed to be over 40,000 years old. And the Shango bone is believed to be over 20,000 years old. By the way, between these two artifacts that are so similar, there's 20,000 years. That's just, I'm not talking about dollars, I'm talking about years. What group of people can talk about a history so long that you see them doing almost the same thing for over the course of now, you could even say 40,000 years.
And you can add to that, as Dr. Charles S. Finch noted in his Star of Deep Beginnings, that the 2N counting system that you find on the Ishango bone is what you end up finding in the way that they calculate in ancient Kemet.
Yes.
So that continuity, not only in terms of the bone and the relationship to the baboon bone in relationship to counting in general and possibly lunar cycles, but the very method for adding and multiplication and whatnot is found on that bone in Congo, 20,000 years ago. You find that in ancient Kemet.
When you wrap your mind around that, was there a literally an educational system that spanned really the length of the continent over tens of thousands of years? Now, scholars above my weight class are going to have to assist in actually having a definitive answer of that.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to say that if you look at the artifacts, it should put you in a situation where you know that here's the direction where we should study.
Mm-hmm.
There's been so little archaeology done in sub-Saharan Africa. So little.
Mm-hmm.
Because when it's clearly African, and you can't pretend that you're talking about something else as they do in North Africa, now there's no interest in educational institutions in the West. That's fine. Once again, this is our opportunity to do great study that actually will posit a history, a high-tech, comprehensive, STEM-based civilization in ancient Africa, tens of thousands of years before we can even find another nation that is not of note outside of the continent of Africa. I'm saying that Africans were doing things that were amazing before we see other people doing things that are mundane. That's how amazing this story is. So what am I saying? The story of Kemetic spirituality, the story of Kemetic mathematics and Kemetic science is not simply a Kemetic story. It's an African story. And it goes back so far. It goes far beyond the written word. And that this means that when I say Kemet, in some ways, I'm not really talking about geographic boundaries. I'm talking about a concept that seems to have flourished at a particular place in time, but that concept is directly connected to those things that came before it.
Indeed. And it's this is one of the reasons why the work that I do focuses on Congo and Southern Africa in relationship to ancient Kemet, because I mean there's a geological reason why you probably won't find as many artifacts like you can in the desert, because the desert is dry and salted, and it'll preserve things longer than in a forest and jungle environment.
That's right.
Where the soil is not dry first and foremost, and then you have a lot of rainwater and floods, and it doesn't preserve artifacts in the way that a desert community would, or like if you're in Europe and it's some stuff gets caught in the ice.
That's right.
In the top parts, and you just have whole human beings frozen that they can extract DNA and stuff from.
That's right.
So the next best thing is to study the remnants that are in the culture and the language. And when you're able to do that, you'll be able to discover some things. Like I'm about to do something on Atum. And as I discussed in one of my latest works, Aluja Volume 2, the word Atum, the word Aten, and the word Ra are all the same word. It's just natural sound mutation from different dialects and languages. It is pronounced differently, and so you're thinking that these are three different deities or names for deities
Mm-hmm.
when they are actually the same from a linguistic point of view, but have just been inherited by a different group of Africans, and just
Mm-hmm.
natural sound evolution, they pronounce them differently.
Mm.
And so, with that said, you still find Atum in Congo.
Mm.
Is that his name isn't Atum, it is Kalunga. And there's a way, using historical comparative linguistics, that you can demonstrate this.
Mm.
And so you may not see an immediate connection, but that's because we don't speak the languages and we don't have this tool. So it's just
right.
Going back to the Hapi thing, and what you mentioned earlier in terms of different ways to achieve the ultimate goal. You wouldn't use one thing to answer all the questions, and it's the same thing when you're doing a historical analysis.
That's
so
right.
Linguistics allows you to do certain things, but a lot of people don't have that toolkit.
That's right.
To be able to answer. So when you see these rare artifacts like the Shango bone and stuff to that nature, and then you examine the languages and the spiritual systems there, you can only conclude that there was a migratory evolution coming out of the Great Lakes region into the Nile Valley.
That's right.
So those people are just the ones who stayed, versus the ones who went up north and then found themselves in a different ecology.
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, people don't really kind of realize this. They were like, well, why don't you see temples and stuff in places like West Africa or in Central East Africa? Because their temples were the forest.
That's right.
When they went to Kemet, they had to imitate them, which is why you see these long buildings with all these trees.
Yes.
In terms of Kemet, they're trying to emulate what they had back home, because you have to do it synthetically.
To even add a little bit there are fewer trees. You're in the desert, so now you're building in stone. And so when you go to the surrounding temple complex around what people mostly call the step pyramid, that our ancient African ancestors called Kebu Neteru, the libations to the divine. Mm-hmm. When you go there, you'll actually see on the ceiling stone logs. They did not have many trees. They were in the desert, y'all. They didn't have trees, but they actually depicted logs in the ceiling out of stone.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to just this is just another piece in what you're describing. So the differences are in the ecology, not as much in the mindset, in the worldview, in the cosmogony, and even as folks that are scholars like asarimhotep can articulate to you, you'll even see the similarities linguistically. Now, we have very few people. I told you when I was talking about the story of my wife, how few people have the sort of ability to understand this on a historical on a linguistic end. We have very few people who can do that. That's part of the reason why this argument hasn't been made by so many other scholars earlier. It's why you're one of the only people that keep saying it. Right?
Yeah.
We haven't done enough of the study. The books themselves are challenging to get.
Exactly.
Here's a personal story. I remember that when Baba Heru was trying to do more study in linguistics and he met Nica said, in order to understand this, there's certain textbooks that you have to get. And he's like, well, I don't know those textbooks. He said, oh no, those are trade textbooks.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember she was loaning him the linguistics textbooks for him to be able to understand part of the linguistic argument, right? Mm-hmm. The books that she was sharing with him, we've never even heard of the authors. You have to be in the field to make some of these arguments. You have to even know that they exist in order to do the study. And so that's why the kind of work that you've done, by the way, you should know Aluja is burning a hole in my shelf. I have not read it, but it's here. Right? It's the kind of work that we're going to have to understand.
Yeah.
And as we make these arguments, then there will be other scholars that come behind you, Asar, and say, I need to also develop the skill here to be able to make the arguments that are being made here and to support the arguments of great scholars like Asarimhotep. And let me say peace to Sister Lakeisha, who's saying peace here too, and peace to so many of you in the chat as well.
Indeed. And it's interesting because I got into this by having a conversation with Dr. Teofilo Benga way back in 2001, I think it was. And because I was in school for computer information systems. And when I did a presentation at a conference, I'm still in undergrad. So I'm doing a presentation on the meaning of Kemet. And so for people who know, I have a contrary argument for the definition of Kemet than what most people will come across. That's an old argument for me. So starting way back in 2000, 2001. So that's where I met Dr. Mario Beatty at this conference. And he gave me Dr. Teofilo Benga's number. He said, you need to talk to him. So this is when he was still at San Francisco State University. And so I called him, and I still had that number somewhere from when he was there, his direct number. And, you know, he was talking, and, you know, of course, he asked me, what am I in school for? And the first thing he said is that, oh, you would be good at linguistics. You should try it. You know, you should get into it because this is what you're going to need in order to ultimately answer the question on the meaning of Kemet. And so that really started, it didn't start my interest in the languages, but to take it more formally and get into the science of it.
Right.
It started with that conversation with Dr. Teofilo Benga. But I noticed in the way that, just as you said, when I'm looking for literature on, you know, relationship link, you know, the African relationships between, the Egyptian relationship between modern African languages, I couldn't find much in English. All the stuff was in French. So I had to learn to read French just to read because that is the tool primarily by the Africans. So that's when I was opened up to a whole slew of Africans, because, you know, this goes again to the resources and funding issue, because, you know, they don't really have Egyptology departments, you know, saying across Africa outside of Egypt itself.
That's right.
And so they don't have money for digs and to do all of these things. All they could do is really study the language and do the philological work. And so they actually have an advantage over the Europeans. The Europeans got the money to do the digs, but the Africans have the languages and, you know, they have the cultures. So when they started looking at the languages and said, like, hey, wait a minute, this is what we say and how we say it over here in Senegal and in Benin and in Ghana and in Congo and in Kenya. And so, you know, that's why I introduce a lot of these African scholars like Oman Digi, Oscar Pafuma, Babacar Sall, you know, Abubakar Musalam, Mubabingi Bilolo, Jean-Claude Mboli, and of course we know Teofilo Benga and Sheikh Anta Diop. You know, they all use language to really kind of penetrate the heart of ancient Kemet. And so yeah, that language piece is very important. So it doesn't surprise me at all that when you mention your soon-to-be wife at the time having only 2 Black people, you know, in the link, because that's something that, and you know, it's akin to mathematics, what people don't really realize, and why it's one of those things that people shy from. So you know, they shy away from mathematics and they shy away from linguistics, because linguistics is logic mathematics, and we need to get more of us, you know, into that kind of stuff so we can start publishing in English. And maybe I won't be one of the few you know what I'm saying, to have that to do that work. And so maybe
Yeah.
someone can focus on some other languages. You know, I like to deal with Chiluba. But getting back to the film itself, you know, what was your impression on the people that were interviewed, you know, in terms of its diversity? You know, what was your impression along those lines?
Well, the overall majority of the people in the film are people of African descent, right? I think that some of us are going to be frustrated by some of the people who are not of African descent. And I think that what we have to do is we have to now recognize that there are scholars who are not African who are making arguments that are advantageous to the African, and we need to become familiar with them. And so that part is going to be really interesting. I know that it was we had a really interesting conversation with some of the folks that are in the film where someone was like, why do we see these people? There are not many of them, first of all, you know, but some of them are folks that we need to be aware of. Like, for example, I'm not even sure how Brother Taki got to speak to Bruce Williams. Bruce Williams, for those of you who do not know, is actually someone who worked at, and I think he still works at, the Oriental Institute in Chicago. That's part of the University of Chicago. His mentor before his death, and he worked in a dig in what we would call Nubia. I'm going to oversimplify some of this because speaking more specifically about it will take me away from the point. But in the dig, he finds a really key artifact known as the Kustal incense burner. In many ways, the Kustal incense burner is one of the pieces that helps us understand that what becomes Kemet begins further south. This is not an argument. This is not a discussion that many Western scholars are interested in having. Because they would like to say, in fact, the person that founded the Oriental Institute, James Henry Breasted, who was sometimes considered, he's sometimes called the father of American Egyptology. He argued regularly that ancient Kemet was the creation of a great Aryan race. Because the Africans were separated from Kemet and northern Africa by this impassable desert, he says, and ill-fitted in greater thought by years of lazy jungle life, is basically the way he says it. Some of the most racist things you're going to hear come from him. That's the guy that gets a major grant to create the Oriental Institute. So when Bruce Williams and his mentor come forward, and his Jegna come forward to actually find an artifact that begins to refute that argument, you should know that he's not treated well at the Oriental Institute. And so he does not, he still works there, but they don't give him any major professorship when he completes his work, which if you find a major artifact, you figure you're going to become one of the most noted professors at the institution. He gets no personal benefit. I think he then becomes a librarian there. Not a great scholar, even though he did this, he assisted in this amazing dig. He becomes a librarian. And I'm going to tell you that for years, I was trying to get in contact with him to tell his story on my former television show called Kemetic Legacy Today. So when I saw him in the documentary talking about the Kustal incense burner and its importance, I was just in awe, because he's not someone who talks about what he did much these days. And Taki was able to get him. So just understand that in order to tell the full story, you're going to have to get the scholars that are able to do it. Most of those scholars who tell the story from our perspective are us. And that's why the overall majority of people in the film are us, right? But you are going to have those few scholars that are not of African descent who have been making this argument at a very high scholarly level. And some of those people are also people who are in the film. It's powerful. Please, folks in the conscious community that are struggling with white supremacy, please listen to what they're saying. Please at least listen to them. So hear what they're saying and say, that's deep, right? These are folks that we have to we have to study their work. We have to critique them when they need critiquing. We need to support them when they need supporting, because they're going to also have a role to play in the evolution and the advancement of African people. They're going to be people that, for the lack of a better term, we're going to need to utilize in order to do that. I mean, just understand that most of the scholars who have the ability to have these conversations in the highest scholarly settings are not in our community for a wide range of reasons. You know what it is like in education for African American children, for Afro-Caribbean children, for Afro-British children. Let's just understand that we are still dealing with the aftermath of our enslavement and a white supremacist system that can morph and change and suit its own needs. We're going to have to not only count on ourselves, but utilize people who are not from our community to move forward. That's what they should be seen as allies that we can use. Now, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't critique them when they need to be critiqued. I was even going to talk about some of my own descriptions of that battle. I was looking for a book here. I'm going to tell you that when I was a young radical at Cornell, when I saw those people that should be considered allies, I used to really get maybe overly focused on the fact that they weren't from our community, right? And I would battle them. It was challenge. I would battle them. You should know that I usually lost those battles really, really brutally. In fact, I remember that when I was a young scholar, I actually challenged Martin Bernal to a debate. Now, you don't know who Martin Bernal is, but look at Asar laughing. What was I, 18?
The man who speaks Chinese and classically trained and in Hebrew and in Egyptian and in Coptic. Yeah.
I challenged him. And it was so bad, Asar, that the folks that were supporting me were like, it's okay. You have to continue to study. They didn't say, damn, you got beat.
That reminds me of when, in 98 as an undergrad, when I first got to Southwest Texas State University, I was still a Hebrew Israelite.
I didn't know you were Hebrew. Uh-oh, this is a story I need to hear.
Yeah.
You're going to hear this story.
But, because I was still a Hebrew Israelite, I was coming in to, like, especially the history classes, the sociology classes, hitting them with and this is ICUPK, back in the day. So not this is when they were ICUPK, the Israeli Church of Universal Practical Knowledge, not the ISUPK.
Have you told the story publicly?
Yeah, I even had a whole segment on Sonetta once.
I didn't see that. You gotta send me the clip to this one. This is deep. Okay, so I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm just.
Yeah. So, I would challenge them. Of course, we the true Hebrews.
Yeah.
And, and so of course I would hit them with the 12 tribes chart, and anybody who wanted to challenge. The eating the pork, Leviticus 11:7, and of course Deuteronomy scriptures, and all this other kind of stuff. That's just what I did. And I look at that stuff now, like, even matter of fact, it's funny. And okay, so when I first got there, people should know that you and I belong to the same fraternal order, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated.
Right. That's right.
So when I got there, Alphas actually got kicked off the yard before the year before I got there for allegedly hazing. So
allegedly,
yeah. So but they wanted to keep the programming going. So the members started other organizations, one being called Kumasi, and which they would teach African history. I'm sorry. One being African history, and and this is a lily white school that we went to, and in a small town, and so there was no Africana Studies program or department and nothing like this. So we had to self-study. So the whole self-study started early, the whole autodidact, but we would self-study and then teach on Wednesdays, but they decided my freshman year to do a like a museum exhibit, right, of African American history. And so these are students, all of them are students. They put together this wonderful exhibit, and at the end of the exhibit, so like the library that we had, it was a big library, and at the bottom floor, which you had to go like underground, they would have this museum there. So there would just be different curations, at different times that would roll through. So this may have been in February during Black History Month, So at the end of the journey that you had to go through to see all the exhibits, you had this, this kind of open book that you can sign and leave information,
comments, or
and give your opinion about the exhibit. Right. So I'm like, this was cool, but it left out that we are the true Hebrews, and that I'm leaving scripture like this is how bad it was. So if anybody knows about the whole Hebrew Israelite thing, like that's the mindset. So believe me, I've come a long way.
Wow.
But I can understand like that young, arrogance, like they don't know nothing. You the one that got the information.
Listen,
I understand.
Listen, the president of the university at the time, who was related to the Belgian throne that was in control of Central Africa and did dastardly, horrible things. The president of Cornell was related to him. Anyway, I had given that man so many fits as one of the radical students on campus that when I was walking at graduation, now this is like 500 students, he's on the dais and we're walking graduate. He got off the dais to come say, "We will miss you," in his being sarcastic. In other words, get the hell out. And I was like, "Oh, I'm for my class. I'll be back here next semester." And he looked at me and said, "How wonderful." Listen, we need that youthful fire, right? We need it to push us forward and not to allow those of us who have a bit more gray in our hair to actually rest on the things that we've accomplished and not to try to continue to change and to adapt to the situation that we're in. But we know that it takes a lot of work to become someone who is able to write scholarly treatises. It takes a lot of study in order to even understand some of these things. We are going to need to continue to support African scholars like Asarimhotep, like Jabari Osaze, like people who are trying to tell this story and are actually trying to do this. Because, this is not the stuff that pays our bills, right?
Indeed.
It's a labor of love. And so you have to understand that we are going to also have to we're going to have to actually find ways to support people who are trying to do the work of our ancestors. And so, and the other thing is, like, folks like ourselves are not the people that are up on the hill, like Dr. Ben and Dr. Clark and Dr. Turner said that I should not be. Don't be that person that's just up on the hill having these scholarly conversations. You have to do it in the hood. And that's what I've done for nearly 30 years now. In the hood. Trust me, it ain't always been easy. When I'm talking to the college-educated Black folk, we have college-educated conversations. I don't get death threats. But being in the hood of Asarimhotep, that's where I get the death threat. From us. From
Yeah.
us, I get death threats every week. Every week. So there's a lot of work that we have to do in order to have our people properly understand what we have done so we can understand what we must do. And so that this is the work that I believe the ancestors have asked me to do. There are many of you who are in the chat at 9:30 on a Tuesday night that could be watching, I don't know, reality TV somewhere. This is the stuff that excites you, that inspires you as well. We are going to have to support each other so that we can do this. Absolutely.
Indeed. And I wanted to say briefly, kind of jumping back to something you had said earlier, and that is, not only, us doing this work, I would like to hopefully inspire or find some people who could inspire us to actually formally go through the process and get those degrees in Egyptology and other things, so you can do this work on that level. So I was just on the phone with Dr. Shamarka Keita before this program started, and that's was a major part of our conversation is because he's like the only one, that loneliness that you talked about, the brother felt in Denmark, like it's almost like that for him because he's the only black bioanthropologist who can understand the arguments in terms of genetics, in terms of bioanthropology in general.
That's right.
And applying it to the study of ancient Egypt. So like technically right now he has no successors.
Right.
And so, and this is problematic, on a large scale. So what we need is, it's fun in fine and dandy for us to have these, online debates on YouTube and be in a chat and, and be all rah-rah and stuff. But we need some of you that, who are very interested and passionate about this stuff. Even if you took, because my education is primarily in computer science, and so I had to learn this stuff.
Funded entirely, do it entirely on your own. That's right.
Exactly. So, I wish I would have, when in that matter of fact, and I kicked myself in the ass, if you can, for this. I was supposed to go to Cornell University.
Really?
After I graduated at the University of Houston, Dr. Conyers was like, I think it was James Turner was there at Cornell, right?
That's the person that more than anyone else, academically, scholastically, scholarly, created Jabari Osaze.
I had an opportunity to get a full scholarship to go to Cornell and get a PhD in Africana Studies.
What?
But I didn't want to do Africana Studies. I wanted to do computer stuff. So it wasn't in computer science then. So like now I'm like,
you graduated undergrad?
I'm sorry?
What year was that? What year was that you were about to graduate?
2002. So it took me longer because of my transfer, and I switched.
Yeah.
Because I was initially in accounting.
Right.
So while I was at Southwest Texas State University, even when I transferred to U of H,
yeah,
I was in accounting. But then because, I grew up in the age of software development, in terms of web and stuff to this nature, I didn't find myself doing any accounting work. So I went to another whole building.
I got it.
Did computer information systems. So it took me a little longer, but I was a computer person. I'm a computer nerd. I like the program.
I have heard you say that.
And
that's powerful. Because listen, we also have people in the STEM fields. We also have, so, you must feel like you're on your own a lot. Because of the field.
Yeah, I'm telling you, when I got to those upper level courses, for the computer science stuff, it was not much of us there. No. All Indians, Chinese, Koreans, and then white folks.
That's right. And they look at you like,
exactly.
You're in the wrong room, right? Are you? Oh, you're here, really? Yeah.
Yeah. So everybody else was like business, administration and stuff to that nature. Good and all, but those STEM fields, we were not in it. And so, this is why, some colleagues and we started Black Science Month, which is October, to really kind of encourage us to get into these STEM fields. And I would love for us to get into because Dr. Keith is a medical doctor as well as a PhD.
Wow.
And so, he uses medical training to be able to study the bones. Like he's the one actually measuring bones and going to the museums and make arguments and analyze genetic studies and things of this nature. And so we need more individuals like that who are trained in those things to be able to come and answer those questions and deal with those pre-dynastic artifacts like Bruce Williams.
Part of it is access.
Yes.
Because you can be one of the most intelligent, one of the most erudite people in our community, but if without particular degrees, you don't have access to do the primary research.
Exactly.
That's the challenge. So listen, I have studied ancient Kemet for decades, but I can't lead an archaeological dig. That's the reason why after I finish this degree this summer, my plan is to actually go, because I said, look, I'm old, but I'm not that old.
Yeah.
Is to actually go and get either an anthropology or literally an Egyptology degree. Because I want to be able to do that.
Yep.
And so I want to show you that. It's amazing you said that. Now listen, Asar-Hotep and I, while we have studied a lot, and that's my brother, we didn't talk about this. This is the third, in my book, 7 Little White Lies, The Conspiracy to Destroy the Black Self-Image. I propose several solutions, right? I think there's a lot of, there it is. I propose several solutions. So in the conclusion, solution number 3 is obtained advanced expertise and specialized skills in order to challenge racism in academic settings. And so this is exactly what we're talking about as you read this piece. I am actually saying to you that in order for us to do this at the highest level, we are going to have to build a cadre of experts who are African-centered, who still have a sense of who they are, so they can go into these settings and make the arguments, make the case. Because what we end up having to do very often is wait for people to make mistakes. That's what we end up having to do. Because we don't have many of the people who are able to have access. So for example, one of the things here's a quick story. When you look at some of the argument that has happened around trying to pretend that the ancient Kemetic people, that ancient Kemetic society was not African. There are people who make those arguments, right? One of them is actually in the film saying something very interesting, by the way. You have to listen to him very carefully, right? One of them is clearly the person that has been in charge of antiquities in ancient Kemet for a very long time. His name is Zahi Hawass, right? One of the things that Zahi Hawass does recently, when he was still in charge of antiquities, is he actually had literally a DNA lab built in the basement of the Cairo Museum. Most people don't know that it's there. There's a DNA lab there, right? And so in one of the documentaries that he's featured in, he's doing the DNA analysis of some of the royal mummies. And I think that it's very interesting that on the screen, when he's talking about Tutankhamun, King Tut, as you may know him, he shows part of the DNA code for King Tut, and only part of it, by the way. And so people were beginning to argue, this is proof that he's European, of European descent. It's only part of the code. Everyone on the planet shares code. You can't make that analysis based on what was on the screen, right? Anyway, they attacked me online because they were like, this is proof. And I was like, you know nothing about genetics. And it's not even the field that I have expertise in, but I've read enough to know that what they were arguing doesn't make sense. Anyway, in the report that comes out from that documentary, in the footnotes, he gives us the haplotype of Ramses III.
Mm-hmm.
In the footnotes. It's not part of the major argument. And in the footnotes, we can now say that Ramses III, perhaps the last great ruler, native ruler of Kemet, his haplotype is the same haplotype shared by like 80% of sub-Saharan African men. His haplogroup.
Yep.
That's in the footnotes. We have to continue to wait for people to make errors to prove the argument. We shouldn't have to do that. We should actually have the people with the expertise to be able to do that. Now, let me say to you that this film attempts to do something really interesting. You're going to see people who are not just thinkers, but scholars, people who are at the top of their field talk about these issues. And I think that that is what is exciting. That's why asarimhotep and I are excited to be in the film, because listening to some of them talk and being part of that God dialogue is amazing, right? And you're going to hear them really make the case for what Africans need to do moving forward. And so I really hope that you are going to really get excited about this documentary. I hope that you're going to do exactly what Brother Asar is suggesting. You pay your ticket and your whole family could watch. I hope that you're going to share this and your task should be to get 5 other families to join the conversation. And you know what? You may not even agree with everything you say in the film. That's not the point of the film. Because in the solutions, the film says, maybe this is something we should explore. Maybe this is something we should explore. Here's what we'd have to know in order to make the decision. So in the end, it doesn't say, here's the final solution. Because the solution to get African people and to get the big boot off our necks is not going to be simplistic. It's not going to be, because the system that subjugates us is not simplistic. We're going to have to use culture to unify us. We're going to have to use economics in order to create self-sufficient individuals. And we're going to have to use politics in order for us to organize ourselves and to maintain power. That's part of what the documentary posits, that we're going to have to look at this from use several different lenses in order to approach this. And so I really hope that what you're going to do, family, is you're going to get other people to get into the dialogue and then say, this is a direction we should go in based on some of the solutions, the suggestions that are made around the end of the film. And so I'm hoping that you're getting excited. I hope you realize that 2 brothers who have spent their lives trying to tell this story, to do this work, the 2 brothers you're seeing right now are in it. And hopefully you'll also be a part of it. Because I truly believe that we are at the point where we will actually be able to push our people forward, not take small steps, but take quantum steps. We've already destroyed the legal subjugation of our people. We destroyed our chains. Now what? Now what? Now we're going to have to create institutions that will allow us to move forward. That's the next stage that we must be in. And so I'm excited. Yeah. I hope you are too.
Indeed, indeed. Well, Brother Jabari, it's been an hour and 43 minutes or so. And I know you're a busy person and, you got a dissertation to write.
Oh,
study for. And
how you gonna end the night like that?
So
this will kick your butt, folks. I'm telling you, it really is. It really does.
Like people need to understand. Like I'm such a, and it. Let me quit speaking in fragments. The elders were harsh on me. When it came to this study of African history and stuff. And they did it out of love and knowing the fight that was ahead. And so, the study ethic that I have is because, you know, I first, when I went to Southwest Texas State, of course, we didn't have an Africana Studies program or department. So, a lot of it was self-study.
Mm-hmm.
But when I got to the University of Houston, we did have a program. You couldn't get a degree in it, but you could minor in it. So I double minored in African Studies and African American Studies, which is part of the reason why I had to be there longer, because I didn't know they were different. And so that's another story for another time. So nobody told me. But, at that, that juncture there, of course, I'm introduced to all these top scholars. And so my introduction, my serious introduction into this, of course, is part of the Independent African Academy. But there's also the formal element in this. And I'm saying all this to say that it's a lot of work. And there were, I wouldn't even be exaggerating if I was to say there was hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars spent on books, on conferences, on lectures, just attending lectures over this time period. So, keep in mind, this is for you longer, but for me, over a 20-year period. Of serious study and accumulation of information. So there's folks who are, maybe new to us, but not understanding that we're not new to this. And that, we've had to go through some serious steps and to prove ourselves, in these particular arenas. And it takes a certain acumen and discipline to do this on a serious level. And so when you get into these conversations with a lot of us who were like us, our freshman years, in college, you want to challenge, saying everything without having that background, you must understand that there is no easy road to this information. And so, I respect, what you're doing, because you understand that. And, I know you're known for your patience in terms of, I'm not that patient. I'll have it for a little while. Then I got to cuss you out. And, just step back for a moment, because I know it, and it's not just because I'm just an ass. I just know the value of proper methodology and being able, they haven't sat in those corners. They haven't sat with Dr. Turner's and the Dr. Benz and Jeffries. And, in my case, the Muba Bingi Belolos, the Oscar Perfumas, and, James Conyers, and, all these other individuals. They haven't sat at those feet and been pushed in that way to think of arguments, more specifically and then more broadly, and to look for information and to synthesize this data into a paper and all this other kind of stuff, and then get scrutinized by these folks. And they tell you, like, I published a book one time and I gave it to, Dr. Conyers, who's the head of the African American Studies program. Most people start off at the beginning and look at the table of contents, kind of looking, and just kind of. He did none of that. He did just like this. Open up to the back and assess my bibliography. He's like, you need more journal articles. Just looking at the bibliography, he could tell the quality of the scholarship just from the bibliography. And that's just kind of funny. He didn't go for the arguments first, or see my abstract or summary. None of that. Bibliography.
There's certain types of information that you're going to find in scholarly journals. That's what he's really saying.
That's what he's saying. And so it's you know, so like when people critique on a YouTube page,
Oh,
I'm not I'm not fluttered, you know, at it. I'm used to scrutiny. I don't get emotional because
right,
of it, because somebody has an opinion. But
right.
saying all that to say, it's just it takes a lot of work, and you have to respect when somebody is in this and does it for real,
That's right.
you know. And this is one of the reasons why, you know, Brother Jabari and, you know, others were included, you know, in the film because of that work that they put in. And so I appreciate you for the work that you do.
Mm,
You know, even if we disagree on certain points, but that's just the name of the game.
that's the fun thing.
Yeah. That's what brings the excitement and motivation to
Right.
dig deeper and sharpen our arguments.
That's right.
And so, you know, a lot of times people think that you'll see some arguments online that is really personal, but behind the scenes we conversing, you know,
Yeah.
cutting on each other and all this other kind of stuff, and they come back. And so, but yeah, so again, I appreciate greatly, you
Mm,
know, one, the work you do, the vision that you have, and your willingness to engage the conscious community or
mm,
just the public at large. Um, and so, you know, I appreciate your contribution again to the film, which
mm,
again is going to be July 18th,
mm.
7 p.m. is the premiere. And so go to happyfilm.com. I'll put the scrolling banner again at the bottom of the screen. Go to this address at the bottom of your screen and purchase your ticket. And
Mm,
so, before I go, this is my last question, and then I'll have some closing word.
sure.
I'll let you have some closing words, and that is your work with bringing people to Kemet. I saw in another program you were discussing that, and
Yes.
is that something that y'all are still doing?
Yeah.
And I know you talked about possibly, or if you haven't already, I know you personally go to West Africa, but
Mm.
making some trips to West Africa. So if you can
Oh,
kind
yeah.
of talk about those two
Sure. Sure. Sure.
things.
Sure. Sure. Most of my travel and most of my work um, on the continent has been through an organization called the African Genesis Institute, which was founded
Mm,
by an amazing couple, Helen and Ali Salahuddin, out of Philadelphia. That's most of what of what I've done on the continent, and that being connected to that institution has really been life altering. It has really been so important. We have taken together over 3,000 people of African descent back to the continent, primarily to Kemet. Nobody takes groups as large, right? It is
mm.
exciting. Most and many of those, I'd say 30 to 40% of the people that go every year are children,
Mm,
because it is primarily a rite of passage program for young people. But of course, we can't call young people and say, "Hey, we going to Kemet. Meet us at the airport at 3." It doesn't work that way. So we have wonderful adults that have assisted us, and my wife and I have now been involved for about 22 years with that particular program. We take annual trips to Kemet and take large groups of people there. It has been amazing, and so while I have been fighting to be able to tell the story of African people through the artifacts, through the sites to our people. We have also been shifting focus in some ways recently to really begin to set up a base in West Africa, particularly in Ghana.
mm,
And so my wife and I have taken groups to Ethiopia, to Kemet, mostly Kemet, and to Ghana. And just last year, you should know, last August, the African Genesis Institute took a group of, man, how many people were with us? I think it was about 80 people to Ghana for the year of return.
mm,
And when those of you are able to travel to Ghana and you go to the Cape Coast enslavement dungeon, you're going to see a plaque of all the people who traveled, including me, my wife, and those folks that were on that trip. And so we truly believe that in order for us to be powerful people, we once more need to be global people. And in order for us to be global people, we need to, in many ways, continue to have powerful relationships in the countries that we're located, while also connecting ourselves back to the continent. So our goal, my wife and I really would love to be bicontinental so that we're able to still do what we do in Harlem, but be also have our base of operations, a home perhaps in Ghana. And so that's what we're looking to do. That has been done through the African Genesis Institute. And so we're still involved in doing that work. And I really hope that you'll partake in that as well. I've personally taken, I believe it's 15 trips to Kemet with the African Genesis Institute, 17 trips overall. We were planning 2 trips this year that got canceled due to the pandemic. But folks, you also, as you are doing your own study, we're talking about how challenging it is. We would do nothing else because it's the kind of thing that excites us, right? When I'm doing this kind of study, I have to remember to eat and remember to sleep because it's what I was put on this planet for, right? And so I know that many of you feel similarly. This is the stuff that excites you. So you have to now begin, if you have not already, to venture beyond the borders of the United States to see how this story comes together, to do your study tours, to do the study trips, to be able to truly put this story back together. And so we're excited to be able to do that. And we really hope that you are going to do similar things as well.
Indeed, indeed. So if they want to, and they meaning the audience, want to get in contact with you and learn more about what you got going on in terms of that travel opportunity for young people and or the Shrine of Maat, or just to purchase your book, how can they reach you and get more information on what you're doing?
You can absolutely purchase the book and get in contact with me through my website, JabariOsaze.com. That's a good way to connect with me. You may know, folks, if you've heard me before, you hear me say that I am a historian and a priest, right? And so I focus on the history of African people, but I am also a spiritual leader. I'm a Kemetic high priest that runs the Shrine of Maat. So you can always get connected to the Shrine of Maat if that's the part of it that you're interested in by going to the shrineofmaat.org. And so there are lots of different ways. Either of those places are good places for you to reach me. And I'll make sure that we are assisting you in your journey, because I know that we, a family, are on the same journey to understand that which African people did so that we understand what we are capable of doing. And so you really have to be part of this global conversation with people of African descent. I truly believe, Brother Asarimhotep, that we are actually, we are geared, we are prepped to be able to make the next leap in moving African people forward. Believe it or not being on the continent can be one of the calamities that we can use for our advantage. African people are in key places around the world. There's a reason why apartheid ended in South Africa, also based on the work of African Americans. It's one of the reasons why one of the first places that Nelson Mandela went to after he was freed from prison was the United States. That's one of the reasons. So that you should also recognize that we are situated in key places around the world. When we come to consciousness and begin to work with each other in networks around this world, no one will be able to absolutely turn us away. We'll be able to actually do things as a global people once more. And so we want you to do the study. We want you to travel to these places. And we also need to find ways to build commerce, because obviously without supporting yourself and without having communities that are more self-sufficient than they are now, we are not going to be able to move forward as well. So we're hoping that you understand how these pieces fit together, and you'll help us in this journey as well.
Indeed, indeed. Well, thank you, good brother, for joining me on this random Tuesday, somewhat middle of the week. during this pandemic. You know, I don't take it lightly that, you know, people will come on this platform and have a conversation with me and my audience. So I am deeply appreciative and greatly honored. And someone in the chat is says, Asar, bring Sister Nica on to compliment this broadcast, even though she was not in the field. So maybe, you know, if she's willing, she could come on and
yeah,
and we can have a conversation.
absolutely.
With Dr.
And I should say to you, Asar, that her major life's work has been to assist African American people of African descent in becoming doctors. So she is right dead smack in the middle of the STEM fields. The two of y'all, and she's a linguist. So the two of y'all, I'd be sitting there not even understanding the conversation, y'all.
Indeed.
So yeah, definitely, I'm sure that she would enjoy chatting with you too. And let me say, you know, I know that you say you're honored by having folks come on your platform, brother. When you are the kind of person that has been doing the kind of work you've been doing, it's exciting to talk to you, brother. I am empowered and excited and pushed forward every time I chat with you, whether it's just chatting by text or on the phone or on Facebook. So I am honored to be able to speak to you. I see you not as just as my fraternity brother, but as a brother in this movement of putting forth African scholarship that will help us move forward. So I'm always excited to chat with my brother Asarimhotep.
I am humbled. I appreciate it. Well, thank you all who are listening live, all of you who are in the archives listening. You know, we appreciate you. So, you know, and thanks those who sent. I was hearing the notices in the well, at least in my headphones. People who made donations. I don't know your names exactly yet, but those who did, I appreciate you for supporting the channel. And no, I wasn't playing Call of Duty. If y'all know anything, you know, in New York, they've been popping them fireworks all over the city. So that's probably what you heard in the background.
It's been crazy, man.
So
I jumped. Y'all probably saw me right in front of my house.
You know. So no Call of Duty at this moment. So, but thank everyone for listening. Please share, like, and if you are new to this channel, please hit the subscribe button and hit the bell so that you'll be notified. And check out some of the archives. You know, we have some powerful researchers and individuals who, you know, I encourage you to study their works and to expand, you know, your palette and increase your bag of wisdom. And so that's the purpose of this channel. Of course, I do my own lectures on the channel based on my own research. But of course, you know, no man is an island. You know, this is a cumulative work and we all build on each other. And I want y'all to, not saying that there's anything wrong with the individuals in the quote unquote conscious community, but I want to expand your knowledge of individuals who are doing this work on various different levels. And so, you know, in any way that I can introduce you to them and you expand your knowledge base, you know, I'm very appreciative of that opportunity. So saying all that to say, that's what you'll see when you come on the channel. So look for, you know, for those who are new, you know, check out some of the more recent interviews and things of that nature. And can you say your book again and hold it up for them to see?
Yeah. It's called 7 Little White Lies: The Conspiracy to Destroy the Black Self-Image. You can get it on Amazon, definitely. You can also get it on my website at jabariosaze.com. And so I'm working on two other books right now, and hopefully they'll come out soon as well. So really, I hope that you are also picking up Asarimhotep's work. I mean, listen, the brother has put together a body of work, and there are many people who are saying that You know, he's putting together a body of work that when he gets a little bit more gray in his beard, he's going to be one of those people that everybody is talking about, right? Because look at all the stuff he's done, and you are lucky enough that most of it has been in English. Take advantage of it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
There's some other stuff that's in. You have to buy some French works. Matter of fact, I start this coming weekend on an article that's going to be submitted in another French text. You know, because you know I'm pretty known in that world, especially among francophone scholars. So you know, but that's the kind of thing. Like I had to learn to read it just to read Diop's works that weren't published in English.
You need to tell me how you did it, brother, because if I am going into the field of Egyptology,
you have to know French.
I gotta know French, but I have to know German. Yeah, so you know,
I have, you know, I could send you this. I have the Pimsleur French levels 1, 2, and 3. It's just MP3 files. Yeah, just they're 30 minutes a day. You just got to be disciplined for 30 minutes, and just because the way that it's done is repetitive. And so and not in the sense that you're just doing this in a sequence, then you move on to something else.
Right.
You'll be introduced to something, then you'll be introduced to something else, and they'll recall you back to the first one, and then you continue, then they'll call you back to the first one, then the second one. So it just becomes, and then in the second one that you get, then they'll refer back to the first one. So you're constantly, you know, forcing this verbal. So it's not, you're not looking at anything. You just kind of hearing. So how a natural learner would do it if you submerge yourself, you know, in listening to it. So it has helped, because I learned the wrong way. I learned, you know, reading the stuff, because there were no French classes where I was. So I just bought the software, stuff like this. So I'm reading the stuff first. And you know, with French, you don't pronounce the last consonants and stuff, and so the even if it looks like an R, it's not really our English R. It's a guttural R. So like you say, you know, rouge, like for red, and things of that nature. It's like, you know, so that kind of stuff. So when you're hearing it constantly, you're trying to pronounce it like them. It helps you to learn it a lot better. So I can send you that, and I'll tell you, like in 3 or 4 months, you'll be solid.
Serious?
Yeah, I'm dead serious.
I need your help, brother. Please help me.
And I'm telling you this.
Wow.
You know, I encourage everyone to learn an African language. You know, it doesn't matter. Just learn an African language.
Right.
But if you are a scholar, you need to learn French or German. Yeah. Because, you know, we were colonized by a whole group of different people. So you know, we write in English because our ancestors were colonized by English-speaking people.
That's right.
You know, but there were some Africans who were colonized by French-speaking people.
That's right.
You know, and others by Dutch and Germans, and so they write in those colonial languages. So once you have access to that language, so much opens up for you, because now you're getting the information from the Africans themselves who speak their native languages,
right,
but communicate globally in the colonial language.
That's right.
So now it's like, oh, okay, I see. Now you have access to some other scholars. So you know, it really kind of opens up things.
I remember Dr. Clark saying to me once that so that much of Cheikh Anta Diop's work was not even translated from the French.
Exactly. Matter of fact,
it was just in the French, brother. You just, you know.
Yeah. So Dr. Raketi Amin, who's also in the film, she, of course, knows French, and she actually studied with an intern, you can say, with Cheikh Anta Diop in Senegal.
Yeah.
She has translated his 1977 work, you know, the parent genetic text, where he is analyzing and comparing ancient Egyptian Coptic to Wolof, and he's making his linguistic case. That's not in English. She has translated that into English, but they won't let her publish it.
Wow.
So if you want to get access to that text, that's one of his magnum opuses. You know, you need to learn French until they decide, to give permission to publish that text. So he has a whole bunch of scientific articles that are in French that you won't get access to. So you need to be introduced to people like Muba Benge Bololo, Abubakri Musalam, Babacar Sal, Omen Digi, Oscar. I said Oscar Perfumo already. What's his name? It's a new cat. He's not new. He's kind of older, but he's new in terms of his PhD. What is his name? Anyway, he's out of Cameroon, and he wrote his PhD dissertation on how the hieroglyphs evolved out of divination. Like, that's stuff you're not going to get here in the English-speaking world. Like, and of course it's in French because that's the colonial language,
right?
Primarily in Cameroon. A lot of places they speak English in Cameroon too,
right?
But so it's getting access to these texts. Like once Theophilo Benga's 1993 work, where he's proven the relationship between Egyptian and Bantu, is not in English.
That's right.
It's like these works. We're trying to get Jean-Claude Mboli's work translated into English, and one of Muba Benge Bilolo. Like I've been given permission by Dr. Bilolo to translate any of his works into English and publish it. I translated one text. I did a small text by Dr. Kalamba in Sapo. That's a name y'all probably haven't heard of, but he wrote a text in French on praying, African way of praying. And so I published that. It's online. You can get it at Amazon. I translate it into English, form. And so, as I get more refined in my French, so I'm really fluid in it, and I can that's part of the thing. I'm be translating that stuff, into English. It's just some of these works is just very large.
Yeah,
and
teams of people that assist and do that work.
Yeah.
But
And people don't understand how, like, there's a work of Muba Benge Bilolo's that is already translated into English, but the funding fell through. The cost of it was $20,000.
Wow.
That's roughly around the same how much it costs to get Diop's work translated in the early 80s. I mean, well, the early 70s, his first work. Right. They had to raise like $20,000 to $30,000 because how much it is per word, per page, and then it's difficult if it's a scientific work. So if you caught the conversation that Dr. Leonard Jeffries had on this program on Friday, he started the translation work for civilizational barbarism, but because it was so much science in it, it caused a roadblock for him, even though he's fluent in French.
Right.
And so like that's a difficult part, and luckily with the linguistic work, I'm fluent in linguistic terminology, so I know how to properly translate what they're trying to say is how we would say it in English. But with other certain scientific stuff, that's a little bit more difficult.
That's right.
And so for those who are looking for some side income every now and then, learn some languages and have the get hired to translate those texts.
Have the acuity to be able to translate
to English. I'm telling you,
Wow.
So that's
incredible.
But we could be here all night. So,
now we just
shooting the ish, as they say.
Right.
Yeah,
man.
But again, we appreciate everyone, and I will do my usual. This is how you can get in contact with me on my social media platforms. So I will see y'all on July. Matter of fact, let me go there first. July the 6th, which is going to be a Monday at 10 a.m. I know it's early, 10 a.m. East Coast time. What is that? 9 a.m. Central time, and then what is that? 7 a.m. for those on the West Coast. But the person I'm interviewing is our good brother Hermel Hermstein, who actually lives in London. So there's a time difference there. and he wrote the Black Sumer series. So it's a 3-volume text. The third one has yet to be published, but there's volume 1, the linguistic evidence, Black Sumer, the linguistic evidence, volume 1, and then volume 2, which is actually split up into 2 books. But Black Sumer, the physical evidence, part 1, and then part 2. But those 2 are considered volume 2 in the text. So we will talk about the relationship of the language, Sumerian to Black African languages, and the physical evidence which supports that the founders of the Sumerian civilization were African people who had more recently migrated out of Africa, not out of the not a part of the initial out of Africa Africans, you know, who lived in that territory. So this is going to have major implications on the studies of the migrations of African people.
That's right.
And of course, with linguistics and things of that nature. So our good brother Hermel Hermstein will be on the program on that morning. So set your reminder. You can find the link to the show. It's already been set up, so you can set a reminder and, you know, get the notification just in case you forget. But that's going to be on Monday,
that one.
July the 6th.
Yeah, oh yeah.
So yeah, I'm telling you, I'm trying to bring in the big guns and have these serious conversations. So with that, I appreciate everyone, and I will see you all then. Hotep.
Hotep.